Hey everybody, it's Kimberly. I'm an eternal life student, which simply means human. At the end of the day, that really is the only title that we need. I think people are like walking books. We each have our own stories to share, and by sharing them together, we can learn and grow stronger. Today, I have a guest who will be sharing his story with us. I would like to welcome Dean Greiner. Hi, Dean. How are you?
Good, thank you. It's a gorgeous Sunday afternoon here on Long Island, and I'm actually in Bayside. So only recently moved to Bayside, but I've lived on Long Island for so long, I just
Oh.
automatically say it without even thinking about it.
It becomes habit, right?
Yes, it does. But
Definitely.
it's a very nice Sunday afternoon in Bayside, and was outside a little bit today on just doing local errands, nothing exciting there, but it's just a nice leisurely Sunday, and sometimes we need those.
Yes, definitely. And also the weather, when the weather's good, you can be out in nature and just breathe in the fresh air and enjoy yourself. True?
That in itself is a field trip.
Yes, definitely. So, one of the things we were going to do today is we were going to talk about the many levels of communication, which I think it could be an important topic, right? Communication is one of the key
Absolutely.
things. Yes. So, um, in your opinion, what do you think are some of the key elements when communicating with someone, to have a good conversation?
I think a key part of it, and this is something that may sound obvious, but is not always, I guess, is listening.
Yes.
Because I think that the listening part is something that we've tended to take for granted, but it's a key part of it, at least as far as I'm concerned, because some people, if they're listening, they might be doing it with a different purpose.
Mhm.
I'll explain that.
Okay.
Some people are, if they are listening, they're already thinking about their response without even hearing what's being said.
True.
And I think that the main purpose of listening should be to understand what the other person is saying, then
Yes.
think about replying.
It's true. You almost have to count to yourself a couple times, count in your head before you respond so that you can process what it is that they're even talking about, right?
Right. Exactly so.
Yes. So with that said, um, part of the listening, I know some people, like you said, they want to respond right away. So they ignore whatever you said because like it just pops a thought in their mind. If you talk about your favorite food, they automatically want to think of their favorite food, right? It's just natural. So it's almost like you have to train yourself, right? To wait your turn. Almost proper etiquette as well, right? Don't interrupt even in your thoughts. And so one other piece is what about perspective also? When you're listening to someone, can you really comprehend even what they're talking about sometimes? Because you haven't experienced whatever they've said sometimes.
That's true. And also, we're bringing our own perspectives to any kind of conversation.
Mhm.
And unless you train yourself to listen first, you have no idea what their perspective is, what perspective they're bringing to the conversation.
True. Very true. Good point. A lot of times people are trying to prove their own point of view, right? Instead of trying to empathize and think of what the other person may be going through. Sometimes this can cause people to, if someone's talking to you about something serious and you don't think it's serious, you may not listen the same way as if it was a topic that you thought was sincerely serious, if that, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, you ever have your children, right? You ever have them come up and they tell you that there's something so horrible going on and you know that you're fine, right? But they get upset because to them it was serious, right? They broke a toy or they dropped the ice cream or something, to them it was huge, right?
Well, that's a matter of not just hearing the tone in their voice, but looking at the expression on their face, and that should give you some, I guess, nonverbal indications as to what it is they're trying to convey to you.
Yes.
And I think they've been the best teacher of all of learning how to communicate.
Oh, true, very true. When there actually is silence and no sound at all, you know that there's something wrong too, right?
Yes, I think that reading the room is goes far beyond just hearing what's said. It's how it's being said, what the um, facial expressions are that accompany the words. All those go into the message that is being sent to you and should be factored into how you're receiving that message.
Yes. No, very true. And a lot of people for business and things like that, like with speakers and presentations, they actually do studies of body language, how to stand, where to be, so that when they're giving a message, it's portrayed a certain way, whether it's serious or relaxed. They want to be heard and they want the message to stick, so they don't want to lose their audience, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think that we've become so accustomed to communicating with either uh, colleagues, clients, what have you, by
Hmm.
email that we've forgotten that there's another way of doing it.
Yes.
How about picking up the phone? You know that
Hmm.
instrument that has a ringtone to it, a
Yes.
genuine ringtone, um,
Very true.
and we can accomplish so much more with one conversation
Hmm.
than perhaps 10 emails. And I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but
No,
it's actually been proven.
yeah, no, I believe it. I've seen it. I've personally experienced things like that, where you get all these emails back and forth when someone just had to say yes. Like that was it. Just a simple answer of yes instead of 10 emails, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, I actually was going to bring up about nonverbal communication, body language, and things like that. So you're spot on right now, where it's not just about the words you use. It's not just about talking. You need someone to hear your message in order for the communication to be effective. And that the person who is listening needs to be able to perceive or understand what you're even saying. They have to have experienced it or try to empathize with whatever you're talking about. But body language affects a lot too. So, have you ever seen someone who doesn't look approachable? So you don't want to go talk to them because they just have that look that they do not want a conversation. Have you ever experienced that?
I think that we all have a one time or another.
Yes.
There is that person that um, I don't want to use, well, it's a little strong a word, but it somehow applies I'll say unapproachable,
Yes.
rather than the word I might have been thinking about, because it's a little too strong. But
Okay.
someone that you get the sense that they're in a certain zone
Hmm.
and they're not welcoming anybody within that zone, if that makes any sense at all.
Yes, it does. Like an unwelcoming type of vibe, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
that's fair to
Yes.
say.
Okay.
And so um, you tend to gauge your reaction to that accordingly. Those nonverbal communications that they're sending out to the world,
Hmm.
you can't help but pick up on those if you're even marginally observant.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's another question when it comes to communication. Have you ever met someone that they talk a lot, like excessively, and because of that, they people actually block out whatever they're talking about because they're always since they're always talking, people tend to not hear them. Does that make sense?
It actually does. I've witnessed that firsthand.
Yeah.
So, um, in fact, if it's a telephone conversation,
Mhm.
um, after about, oh, I don't know, say 5 minutes of a very densely worded monologue,
Hmm.
um, I'll hear the question, "Are you still there?" I says, "Well, yes, I am. I was waiting for my turn in the conversation to arrive. I didn't know
Yes.
what else to say. You
No,
know,
but
I
it's
was trying to
true.
be respectful of the other person, and yet,
Right.
at what point do you want me to respond? I'm not quite sure.
Right.
So there's that going
No,
on.
it's true. So, with that said, sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, it's not even with you. Sometimes they're having a conversation with themselves, right? It's one-sided.
Very possibly. You
Yes.
know, you're not quite sure whether you are their audience or they are their own
Yes.
audience. I'm not, and it's a matter of allowing the monologue to ride out to completion and then finding
Hmm.
out the answer to that question even.
True. Very true. So here's another one for you. You ever have people come up and they're having a conversation with you, but you already know what the conversation is going to be. So, for example, someone, you know, they want something. So they're just coming and they're talking nice to you, but you know, in the end, they're going to say, by the way, can you do XYZ?
Mhm.
Right? So sometimes you get the fake conversation or whatever you want to call it. True?
You've described a number of conversations I've had with one or the other of my children at any given time.
Oh, yes.
You see, part of that is precedent. You recognize the signs
Hmm.
and you know where they're going with this.
Yeah.
So I'll say, can you do your old man a solid and just kind of let's take this where you wanted to go in the first place?
Exactly.
You know, and
True.
then it's a variation on how did you know? So let's just say we've been there.
Yeah. Yeah. We visited this conversation once before, right? That's what you're
Yes.
saying. Ah.
So,
True.
in a way, it kind of takes some of the stress out of it for both of you because,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, we know we're going to wind up there. Let's see if we can
Hmm.
maybe reduce the number of steps to get there.
Yes, it's true. I do the same thing with my son. You know, we'll be talking and he's like, "So, how is your day?" And I'm like, "What do you want?" You know, like automatic. I know exactly if he's starting with that conversation that's what he's trying to like butter me up and get me ready because he needs something. So, it's kind of funny like that. You like you said, there's certain cues you kind of know. So, um I have okay, so now I'm gonna switch it a little bit and I want to talk about communication with yourself and similar in the way of current thoughts, past thoughts, and future thoughts, and your own self comprehension. Because sometimes we're mixed with our past, present, and future thoughts that we have to kind of interpret how we want to approach what we're even telling ourselves. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of times I had to make the distinction between the former self at different stages and say, all
Yes.
right, you know what? You're not your son's age anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have to kind of remind myself of that so that there are decades of life experience that have influenced how I might react to the same set of circumstances that might have existed in a prior time.
Yes. True. Very true. And on the same token, as you're having those thoughts, now if you're talking to another person, right, you're having almost a double communication, one within yourself and one with the other person, because you have to decide which version of you is responding, right? Your past experiences or the current one that you are going through at the moment, which I think is fascinating myself. Um, what do you think?
I've
I've
actually
actually
done
done
that in the conversation itself. I would say, if you were to ask me at this point in life, my answer would have been this.
yes.
But you're asking me this question now. So
Hmm.
this is how I would respond now.
Okay.
And they can actually see that evolution that's taken place in the ensuing years then.
Yes, yeah. And you can actually even tell them, before I was agreeing to whatever the topic was, but since then and you've learned, now you can kind of like educate, mentor, or point them in a different direction, maybe from your other experiences. So it's another layer to communication of which part of you are you sharing in the conversation? Your past or your present or even your future? Maybe you're planning things in the future that, let's say people are planning for retirement, right? People are planning for vacations. They're planning for future things, right? You were planning for moving and you moved. There's a perfect
Mhm.
example, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, with that said, you then can start to tell them, well, I started this process, but I'm not there yet. But these are kind of my goals or the stepping stones of where you're trying to go. So you kind of can play between all different realms, if you want to call it, the past, the present, the future. And I think that's kind of where advice is given, right in between all of them. Does that make sense? Do you agree?
That makes perfect sense. I actually had a conversation like that
Hmm.
with a friend I have known. Let me just think about this a second. About 45 years. It sounds inconceivable to even say that, but yes. Um, we've talked very recently, in fact, about what I plan to do, whether it's 6 months into the future, 2 years in the future, 5 years into the future.
Hmm.
And because there's a frame of reference for so much of the past, that those um, revelations, for want of a better word,
Hmm.
of future plans seems to be that much more startling because the past is the primary frame of reference for them.
Definitely. Yeah, because that's all they know. That's what they've experienced, right? Until they get to the next stage.
Yeah, so that saying, "Wow, I didn't see that coming," is essentially their reaction to that. The fact that knowing somebody for 45 years and yet still being able to surprise them
Yes.
is a revelation actually to both of us.
So another thing that I have learned is that sometimes when people are talking to you, they're remembering a past version of you, right? Just like we were
Yes, they
talking
are.
about. And so they may be talking to the older version, not the current person that you are, you know. And so when you respond differently, they're confused sometimes, right? Because they don't know what happened, right?
That has happened actually on a number of occasions. Um, because the conversations I'm having with some of those friends I've had a long time,
Hmm.
they're remembering the carefree spirit, say from my college years.
Hmm.
Um, the one who could go to a wedding and a concert the same day and then go to work the next day.
Yes.
You could do that at 22.
This
You
is
can't
true. You
even
can
imagine doing that now.
I have to go to bed by a certain time, right?
Yes, exactly.
You gotta,
Oh,
there's certain things that have to be done. There's no more of that. And if you do try it, you're gonna feel it the next day,
you
right?
do what I call the hurt dance.
Yes, very much so. I agree with that. So,
So I think that they're rather surprised about uh, the perspective even if they share that perspective now, because we've all gone through those life
yes.
changes over time,
Yeah.
and yet they're still holding on to the memory of that fun-loving dude that you were.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they haven't been able to grow with you. They're just stuck in that one point in time, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
They too have realized, oh, you know what? I don't have limitless energy
Hmm.
now, and yet they're still remembering the version of you that did have that.
Yeah, a lot of times, let's see if you can answer this question. Um, what we feel in our mind is different than what our body is. Do you feel that you are the age that you are now in your mind?
No, and I'm kind of grateful for that
Yeah,
because I
exactly.
think that that frees me up to be more willing uh, to try new things, experience new things,
Hmm.
uh, because the spirit can match that fun-loving dude that I was, even
Yes,
if the energy level doesn't match it.
just a little bit slower, that's all. Just a little bit slower and a little bit of a curfew. That's all. Nothing too much. You just adapt.
And that's the difference. You mentioned the word curfew.
Yes.
Um, in high school, I would, especially during the week, know that I was going to bed at a certain time because, well, you had no choice. You
Right.
know, parents' house, parents' rules. Okay.
True.
At a certain point, though, those curfews are self-imposed.
Yes. Very true. No, very true. You learn your body or your body tells you this is how it's going to be. Right?
Exactly.
Very true. So, okay. I just kind of want to recap a little bit about what we've talked about. The podcast is going to end soon. So, I just want to give you the heads up there, okay?
Okay.
Um, so we were talking about the many levels of communication. And one of the things that we agree is you don't just need to be the talker, you need a listener in order for it to work. True?
Absolutely.
And it's not just about listening. You have to be able to understand and comprehend what it is they're even talking about to have a fulfilled conversation, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes perspective or perception can change the outcome of it, even the way the message is received. So we talked about body language. We talked about our own personal self comprehension, depending on what age you're referring to, or what people are perceiving as you at that moment because they may be remembering you, a different version of you when they're talking, right?
Exactly right.
Perfect. So I think that we covered a lot about communication. And I appreciate you taking the time to join me on this podcast. This has been a wonderful conversation to have. And I think, hopefully people have learned a lot from us today.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me to this conversation. I enjoyed it immensely myself.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.